Well, hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show. Ryan Kaufman coming your way live from Albuquerque. And if you're watching on the stream, you get to see my lovely accommodations here in the land of enchantment. Good to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I would love to get your thoughts if you want to text them in at 719-247-1313. Coming up tonight, because you may be asking, why is Ryan in Albuquerque? Air Force in New Mexico to close out the regular season tonight in the pit. So a little bit of a catch-up day today because I was traveling here to Albuquerque. Couldn't get on air. So there's so much that happened over the last few days that I want to get into over the course of this program. Let me start here because it might sound that we're kind of beyond this for the Denver Nuggets, a team that is a championship contender, right? Moral victories. It may feel like the Nuggets are a little bit beyond that at this point, but and I'm not a big believer in moral victories either, but I can't help but look at that game on Sunday and not feel as positive about the Denver Nuggets in that second half as I have the entirety of the season. And think about what we're judging against. This team does not have a lot of banner wins, right? They beat the Lakers at Crypto early in the season. They beat the Thunder early in the season. Since then, it has been blowout losses to the Knicks, blowout losses to the Timberwolves, to the Cavaliers. Obviously, they got beat just last week by Luka's Lakers. So, and then they lost the first meeting with Boston. So there's not a lot of signature Nuggets wins this season, and it's just the way that it's been because there aren't that many games that you can qualify as that, given where the Nuggets are. Beating a team like Detroit, as good of a win as that was, to be able to beat Detroit, who's on an 8-game winning streak. Detroit's not on the Nuggets level. The Pacers aren't supposedly on the Nuggets level. So it's hard to look at those games and say, wow, that this is what the Nuggets can be. What is that aspiring to be better than the fourth or fifth best team in the East? So there's a finite number of games in which you could say, hey, if the Nuggets win this game, that's a signature win. That's their, best win of the season. And they didn't get it done against Boston. But in that second half, they took a game that they were going to be embarrassed. And look, the circumstances surrounding that game were one conducive to the Nuggets getting blown out, right? For the Nuggets, it was the last game of the road trip, third game in 4 days. The Boston Celtics, who never lose 3 games in a row, were on the verge of losing 3 games in a row in Boston. So I had somebody text me Sunday morning and say, do you think the Nuggets get blown out today? And I would say all signs point to yes, right? And that first half looked that way with the Denver Nuggets. And mentioned something on X around halftime. The Nuggets, I thought, in that first half were trying to out-Celtic the Celtics, which is a completely losing proposition, right? I mean, you're gonna sit there. The Nuggets have been hailed as this kind of alternative to the wave that is sweeping the NBA right now, which is everybody jacks up threes, right? The Nuggets are the antithesis of that. Well, they got too into trying to match the Celtics. And there was one sequence in the first half where the Nuggets missed, I think, 2 3-pointers, tried a third. Like it was, and then on the other end, the Celtics would just cash. Like it was almost an embarrassing sequence where the Nuggets were flailing, trying to knock down threes. Meanwhile, the Celtics were doing it like it was nothing because that's who they are. And that's not who the Nuggets are. And I was talking on X to somebody about this, exchanging tweets back and forth. And my thought is like, look, and it's not just for that game, but it's for this entire season, right? If the Nuggets play their game to the best of their ability and they lose to a team like Boston, then so be it. Then you come away saying, you know what? Nuggets got to invest in three-point shooting. They can't be this antithesis of the rest of the NBA. They got to get in line because it's just they can't trade threes with twos. But that would be the conversation. But there's so many other things that we talk about before we get there. You know, Jamal Murray in his how inconsistent he is, and in the games where Michael Porter is on a milk carton and the bench is terrible and all of these other things. Like, I just want the Nuggets, and it's part of why it would have been better to have Celtics Nuggets last year. And that was the finals matchup we were supposed to get. We didn't. And why it would be a good matchup this time around if the Nuggets prove themselves worthy of getting out of the Western Conference, because it is such a clash of styles. Right? It is 2 very different ways of doing it. And I want to see that. As a basketball fan, I want to see whether this direction that everyone is going and shooting threes that the Celtics have championed and led the way on, is that the only way there is to win moving forward in the NBA? Because I just saw the Nuggets a couple years ago play much the same way that they do now and win a title. The personnel was different, but they played in much the same way, right? Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, 2-man game. So what I want to see, and what I hadn't seen in that first half against Boston the other day, was just play your game, Nuggets. Do what you're going to do. And if the Celtics do what they're going to do and they beat you, then at least you're like, then you know. But in that first half, the Nuggets were just so, they were trying to match the Celtics 3-pointer for 3-pointer. And it's like, this is not the team I've been watching all year. They don't do this. In fact, it's a big sore spot, right, with the Nuggets, that they can't shoot threes or unwilling to. So what was so positive about that second half, even in defeat, was that the Nuggets played their game. Jamal Murray was shooting mid-range shots. They were playing that 2-man game. They were going through Jokic. Like, they were being the Nuggets. And the Celtics were being the Celtics. And lo and behold, the Nuggets close the gap. They get closer and closer and closer. And ultimately, they come away late with a couple of empty possessions. And that was it. And the moral to the story is play your game out of the gate. Don't fall behind by nearly 30. And maybe it doesn't come down to those last couple of possessions. So I felt better watching the Nuggets in that second half against Boston than maybe I have at any point this season, because I'm like, okay, that team's still there, right? There's still aspects of this Nuggets team that are still in place that you can believe can advance in the playoffs. And then you throw on top of it that the Boston Celtics are the defending champions. And that's certainly a game that you pay attention to and make proclamations about. So I was heartened by what I saw in the second half from the Denver Nuggets. The way they can truly, and I said this on Friday going into the game, The way that the Nuggets can truly prove to be the antithesis or the remedy to the way that the NBA is going is if they can stop teams from making three-point shots. The whole key at halftime was not the Denver Nuggets shooting a better percentage from three. I mean, if they did, great, but that wasn't the formula here. The formula was offensively, get back to your game, play the way that you play to your strengths. But defensively, it's try to limit what the Celtics do. And I thought the big key in the second half was not that the Nuggets started to shoot better from three. It was that the Celtics shot worse from three in some part because of the Nuggets defense. That's what we've been waiting for with the Denver Nuggets. I'm much more concerned with the Nuggets' inability to stop teams from shooting the three than I am the Nuggets' inability or unwillingness to shoot the three themselves. And I thought that's what you got in the second half. You got offensively the Nuggets getting back to what they normally do, and you got the Nuggets being able to slow down Boston, who shot a ridiculous percentage from three in the first half. They were able to defend better. Look, all of this is to say I don't think that the Denver Nuggets beat the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series. I mean, that's my overarching takeaway from that game. I don't think Denver beats Boston in a 7-game series. But prior to that game, the bigger question was, are the Nuggets going to even get their chance? Right? With the Lakers' resurgence with Luka Doncic and how much of a wagon Oklahoma City has been, and the fact that they still don't match up great with Minnesota. Like, the question before Sunday's game was whether the Nuggets would even get a shot at Boston. I don't think they would beat Boston in a 7-game series. But for one rare instance this season, the Nuggets went toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the NBA, and for large stretches of that game, outplayed them. And that has been missing. Right? They got embarrassed by the Knicks. They got embarrassed by the Wolves. They got embarrassed one of the matchups with Cleveland. Like this, it's not that this team, they're talking about the Knicks and how they're 0-7, 0-8 or something against the top 4 teams in the NBA. With the Nuggets, it's like, it's not just their record, which I think is now 2-8 against the best teams in the NBA. It's that they weren't even competitive. They're getting blown out by these teams. And I think the first step here in the Nuggets turning it on, because I think there are some people that are feeling like it's February. The Nuggets are going to turn it on. They're going to get back to who they were, and then away we go with the postseason. We'll see. But I think what you were just hoping for is that the Nuggets showed that they belonged on the same court as the Boston Celtics. And in that second half on Sunday, they certainly did. Outplayed them. They were the better team in the second half. It's just they dug themselves such a deep hole that they couldn't ultimately, they had to play almost perfect in the second half. In a couple of possessions, they came up short. But no moral victories. But the Nuggets in the second half showed that even though the team, some of the parts are still different, there's still some of that championship team there. And ultimately moving forward, is there enough of it to get the Nuggets through to the NBA Finals to get 7 games against Boston instead of just the 2-game regular season series? I'll take your thoughts on that. If you want to text them in, 719-247-1313. We'll go across the hall, so to speak, at Ball Arena. Avalanche in action tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins with some new faces and what that means for the trade deadline coming up on Friday. You're listening to Drive Time Sports on Extra Sports 1300. course, Falcons close out the regular season against New Mexico, obviously being here in Albuquerque. That game tips off at 7 o'clock right here on Extra Sports 1300. Very simple for the Falcons tonight. They need to win, and Fresno State needs to lose. If that does indeed happen, then the Falcons will get the 6th seed. They will get either San Jose State or Utah State, depending on how their results go tonight in the first round of the Mountain West tournament, which begins Sunday in Vegas. So, yeah, I'm here in Albuquerque, back in Springs for a couple days, and then off to Las Vegas. Also on the docket today, as far as sports will go, and now I'm looking at on the stream, and the Albuquerque skyline is shining bright into my room here in Albuquerque. So the Avalanche are also in action tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they'll have a couple of new faces on their team in Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey, who they acquired just the other day from the New York Rangers for Parsonen, UC Parsonen. They gave up, and they gave up a 2nd round and a 4th round pick. And look, I'm not overly worried about the draft capital that they gave up, because I think one thing that with both the Nuggets and the Avalanche is, let's not worry so much about what the next 5 years look like, and let's worry about what now looks like. And let's not pretend NHL draft picks are like gold. Like, not all draft picks are weighted the same in every sport. So, yeah, I mean, a 2nd round, but what I'm more interested in is what they're getting for that, right? And the fact of the matter is, Ryan Lindgren has been horrendous for New York over the last couple of seasons, last season and this season. And Jimmy Vesey's always been a depth guy. I remember he had one really big breakout year, but for the most part, he's, where the Avs have him, right? He's a depth forward, maybe can give that bottom 6 a little added juice. But Ryan Lindgren, in terms of his production and his play, has fallen off a cliff the last couple of years. And they've had him paired with Adam Fox. And here's the argument, and Jared Bednar made this argument the other day when he was talking about him. The Avalanche aren't going to ask Ryan Lindgren to play with Cale Makar, right? They're giving him a smaller role and a less prominent role. And they're saying the things that Ryan Lindgren is good at, or the quality of player he is right now, we can put him on one of our, 2nd or 3rd pairing, and that's what we need him to be. We don't need him to play with Cale Makar. Devon Taves does that. So we'll put him with somebody else, play fewer minutes, less of a prominent role, and they think that they're going to get the most out of Ryan Lindgren, who, even though he's fallen off a cliff the last year and a half, was really good before that. And so it reminds me kind of the move, a type of move that the Avs make a lot, right? They look at somebody, and normally it's guys that are drafted, like Valerian Nichushkin, right? He was a high draft pick, didn't quite work out where he was. Avs bring him in, coached by Jared Bednar, plays with the players that Colorado has, and we see the talent finally show through. I think this is similar to that, where they're saying, we're going to bring Ryan Lindgren with us. Overall, a better defensive team. We're going to give him a lesser role and not put as much pressure on him. And maybe that change of scenery does him some good. So I'm curious to see what Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey do. And I no means I don't hate the trade by any stretch of the imagination. It's kind of it's a depth move. It shouldn't elicit strong feelings one way or another, but it's the type of move too that you make when you're putting the finishing touches on your team, right? Remember when the Avs got Andrew Cogliano a few years ago, or when they got Nico Sturm. Like some of these moves that they've made at the deadline the last few years to either are essentially to put the finishing touches on their roster. Like we have our core. Now we're just we've identified we need depth in a couple places. We get it. And in years past, you're like, okay, the Avs, that makes sense. The Avs still have that big matzo ball hanging out there, which is the second line center spot. This Avs roster, to me, is not optimized. When they got Nico Sturm or when they got Andrew Cogliano, there were very few spots on the team where you were like, well, they have a glaring need here. So it's like, okay, get some veteran depth. What do they do about second line center? And Chris McFarland the other day when he was discussing the trade said that they're not satisfied yet. So what does that mean? I mean, he's not going to say, hey, we're going to take a big swing between now and Friday. But he's intimating that they're not done. Or at least it's their hope that they're not done. So the question is it the second line center? Because to me, making another move like they just made with Lindgren and Vesey, I mean, it would be even more of a nothing burger. Like you're just going to get third D line guy, three D pairing guys, and four fourth line centers. Like that's what you're going to acquire between now and Friday. So I think they're looking at a second line center. And look, easier said than done. The move they pulled off to get Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey is much easier to make than the move to land, Braden Shen or certainly Sidney Crosby. But I think that's Chris McFarland with a little wink to you, the fan, and saying, like, we know. Don't know if we're going to be able to get it done, but we see the same thing you see. Maybe Casey Middlestat isn't the answer. And I've said I was with them the whole way. I thought that it was a great move when they acquired him. I thought it was smart to extend him. I had high hopes for Casey Middlestat. And it's just this is a team right now that cannot wait. And it's part of the reason, right, that, even though they brought in a player at a similar point as Casey Middlestat, when they traded Bo Byram, is kind of the same idea with Bo Byram, right? This is a guy that they can't wait any longer. Like they're in a window of contention now. They're in a spot now where they can win Stanley Cups. They can't wait on someone to realize their potential. But they bring in Casey Middlestat, and I think they would even tell you, if you gave them true serum, that they expected Casey Middlestat to be more productive than he has. So I think that was Chris McFarland's way the other day of going, like, we know. We see it too. So we're looking. So we'll see what happens between now and Friday. But here's the other storyline right now with the Colorado Avalanche. And we'll see what happens tonight. But looking at them, these last two games, are we sure it just wasn't missing Valeri Nichushkin? I mean, these last two games, the Avs have looked so different in a good way. And while the production and Nichushkin got a goal the other day, but like it's not like Casey Middlestat has put up 4 points in his last two games. So the production's not quite there. And that's why I think the Avs are looking to see if they can upgrade at that position. But I think at the very least, it's through two games, which is a small sample size. A lot of it is missing Valerian Nichushkin. I think at least that has to be said. Now, is simply playing with Valerian Nichushkin for the rest of the season going to unlock Casey Middlestat and he's going to be the player that the Avs hoped he would be? Well, you only have what, tonight and one other game? I think they play twice before Friday's deadline. You don't have that much time. So if there's that thought kind of sitting out there, Casey Middlestat better show something tonight, right? And get on the board a couple of times in this game to make me or you or the Avalanche feel a little bit differently about Casey Middlestat. But gosh, man, adding Valerian Nichushkin has made a lot of difference. A lot of difference with this team. And we'll see how the next how tonight goes and see as we get closer to deadline. But that may be the biggest deadline acquisition for the Avs is bringing back Valerian Nichushkin, and he's certainly paid dividends so far through 2 games. So interesting game tonight against Pittsburgh. Again, Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey. I need to look at the lines. I'll do that during the break to see where exactly they are. There's been a lot of talk, but see what the lines are for this evening against Pittsburgh, and then the trade deadline on Friday. Now, one other piece of Avalanche business that I want to get into here in the first hour, I'll do it coming up next. I mentioned Valerian Nichushkin might be the most significant deadline acquisition the Avs make. That's because another potential internal deadline acquisition is definitely not coming back now and maybe ever. I think we're here, and even the holdouts are getting to where you and I have been for a while now. We'll talk about Gabriel Landeskog next on Extra Sports 1300. You heard the 30-time MVP, Drive Time Sports, live from Albuquerque. Thank big shouts to DJ Michaels, who's back at the Extra Sports 1300 studios, holding things down over there. One other aspect of Chris McFarland's press conference, yes, it was yesterday, right? Days run into each other. Anyway, talking about Gabriel Landeskog. The direct quote was, I don't foresee it in the next day or two or week or two here. I think you guys can figure out where this is kind of going. Now, I don't think that is Gabriel Landeskog is done forever. I don't think Chris McFarland with that quote is saying Gabriel Landeskog's career is over. That's he's saying he's not coming back this season, right? That's all I think Chris McFarland was hinting at. Right? Like, yeah, we're not getting Gabriel Landeskog back. And it's not surprising. Like, I'm sorry, if you're somebody that was holding out hope for Gabriel Landeskog, I feel bad for you, because those of us who have been talking about this for weeks and months have known better, that he's not. When he has setbacks, when he's not progressing, when all this stuff is happening, and just the idea of the fact that he's not back, right? Now he's not even following the Lonzo Ball timeline, right? Those two were supposed to be linked. When Lonzo Ball comes back, you wait a couple months, here comes Gabriel Landeskog. It just hasn't happened for whatever reason. Part of this is the procedure he had is not radical in, it's a medical procedure, but guys don't have it, right? It's pretty experimental in terms of whether it will work for a professional athlete. And it's working to some degree for Lonzo Ball, but he plays a very different sport that asks you to do much different things. And one of the things that basketball does not ask you to do is fly full speed at another human being and hit them into glass and a board. So, and nobody's going to tell us, maybe one day Gabriel Landeskog will explain what ultimately kept him from getting back out on the ice. But hockey's a lot different than basketball. And there are things that Gabriel Landeskog has to prove that he can do before he can get back out on the ice. And he just at no point during his recovery ever showed those things clearly. And you have Jared Bednar about a month ago saying he had a setback or he's not progressing. He said something to that effect, and that should be a red flag. So, and I get it. It's a guy that means so much to this team, in this franchise, that I get it. If you're a fan, you were probably holding out hope. And you're trying to be positive and putting it into the universe and all these kind of things. But I've been real on this subject for over a year now. Like, I think we are far closer to the retirement end of the spectrum than we are the end of the spectrum that is Gabriel Landeskog comes back and is a contributor to the Colorado Avalanche. I haven't been all the way on retirement, but we're like right up against it. But the idea that he was ever going to come back and be anything close to what he was, I that hope, I tried to talk you out of that hope a long time ago. Of course, Chris McFarland did say that, reiterated that Gabriel Landeskog gets as much time as he needs. And I get that. And we have to kind of set the record straight here on what the Avs can and cannot do. Just, it's a good refresher. Gabriel Landeskog has been on long-term IR this whole time. Okay? So when people say Gabriel Landeskog is not keeping the Avalanche from making trades, they're half right. Because you've seen this with Mark Stone in Vegas, right? If a player is on LTIR, you can basically get their salary credited to you. So the Avs could essentially, whatever Gabriel Landeskog makes, was at 9.5. They can basically spend some portion of that. They can acquire a player that makes almost that much money. So Gabriel Landeskog isn't keeping the Avs from making in-season deals, at least financially, right? But they're only telling half the truth. There is a Gabriel Landeskog, whether people want to admit it or not, he has a spot on this team. Look at this roster. There's a spot that Gabriel Landeskog is holding on this team. And if the Avalanche can't go out and I don't know, Mitch Marner, that's a name being thrown out there. They actually can't acquire Mitch Marner. And I'll tell you why they can't. Because the minute that Gabriel Landeskog is back healthy and his money counts against the cap, how are they going to pay everybody? So, yes, in season, the Avs can acquire players, but part of the reason why they got Casey Mittelstadt was because it was somebody that they could sign to a cheaper long-term contract. So once the player comes back, you can't use LTIR anymore. So if the Avs, and I don't know that the Avs are, but my point is to say that Gabriel Landeskog is not keeping the Avalanche from moving on or being able to do something, they're only half right. Because if the Avalanche were really out big game hunting, they really can't, because the minute that Gabriel Landeskog is healthy, his contract, not only is it guaranteed, but it would count against the cap. And then who would they get rid of? So he is keeping the Avalanche from moving on. There's a salary cap practical reason why he is, but there's also an emotional aspect to this here. Right? And it's felt differently with Jared Bednar and the players and the fans. Like, Gabriel Landeskog is hanging over this organization. And I've said it before, and I'm not gonna change it. This offseason, there has to be some resolution. There has to be. And yet the talk from Chris McFarland the other day just further cements it. There has to be a definitive move. Either Gabriel Landeskog's got to be ready day one for the season, or the Avs have got to figure out how to move on, which isn't going to be easy, because there's very little in the collective bargaining agreement that can allow the Avalanche to recoup. That's what LTIR is for. They don't say, hey, you don't have to pay this guy. They still pay Gabriel Landeskog. It's just that his salary doesn't count against the cap. Some part of this organization is not able to fully move on because they're holding a place in their heart or their mind or on the organizational flow chart for Gabriel Landeskog. And if he's not going to, they have to make a decision. And I don't know if you trade the guy. I don't know if you can cut him. I don't know. But it might have to come to an unceremonious end. Gabriel Landeskog in an Avalanche sweater for the Avalanche organization to truly move on. And like we're talking about, they got to trade Casey Middlestat after he's been here for a year, right? And it's like, well, get him out. What's the reason for getting him out? Well, because they can do better at that position. Don't you think they can do better than an unavailable Gabriel Landeskog? Don't you think even if he's able to get back out on the ice, that there are players out there that the Avalanche can acquire that would be upgrades? Like, no one that is talking about this is anti-Gabriel Landeskog. Everyone talking about this acknowledges what he has meant to this organization. And everybody just would prefer, and me included, would just rather Gabriel Landeskog be back to 100%. If Gabriel Landeskog is back to what he was in 2022, then there would be very few players in the NHL I'd rather have than him. But right now, he's not available. And when he comes back, if he comes back, if he comes back, he's not going to be the same player. And he's going to cost them $9.5 million in a hard cap league. I get that the cap went up, but they got to pay Cale Makar soon. You know, maybe they might get somebody else worthy of being paid at some point. They had to trade Mikko Rantanen in part because of this. Right? You can't convince me that Gabriel Landeskog has his absence or them letting him take his time, which they should. You don't want to rush the guy back. It would be catastrophic. But this whole situation, you can't tell me this whole situation is not holding back the Avalanche and affecting the Avalanche. You can't convince me of that. Either there's either the Mikko Rantanen trade is a direct result of it, or their inability to get, like, why weren't they interested in Seth Jones? Why didn't the Avs get Seth Jones? You can't tell me that there's not a move out there that the Avs have discussed that go, well, what happens when Gabriel Landeskog's healthy? It's like they're running out the clock on Gabriel Landeskog's contract, and then you're going to see, I would almost bet if Gabriel Landeskog was his contract, and I think his contract, and DJ, you could look and let me know, but I think his contract still got years on it. But either when they trade him or they cut him or whatever is available to them, I would say in that same time frame, whether that same offseason, the Avs add a significant piece. I would bet you. I can't go along with the fact that this has not cost the Colorado Avalanche, and this is not hindering them. It's a garbage situation. Like, nobody likes it. Everybody wants Gabriel Landeskog back. But at some point, the Colorado Avalanche need to face facts and understand that this is a business, and they are in the business of winning Stanley Cups. Yes, the LTIR loophole that Vegas has so expertly exploited over the years, the Avalanche have been able to dip into that. But there is a wider range here. This impact is greater than just, hey, we can use LTIR, all good. They're doing Gabriel Landeskog a favor. They are. And I've said this whole time, at some point it needs to, Gabriel Landeskog and the Avalanche got to look at each other and say, okay, we're even. Now what do we do? I helped build up the culture of this team, helped to become a Stanley Cup winning team. And every year since, You guys have paid me my full salary. You've been patient with me. You've done all this. You haven't rushed me. Like at some point, the Avs and Gabriel Landeskog are even. And then a difficult decision needs to be made. And it's one that nobody wants to make. I get it. But you can't have a guy that played that prominent of a role. And don't tell me that the Avs have. What did they replace Gabriel Landeskog with? Jonathan Drouin? Like you may say that's his replacement in essence, or who's been filling in for him. But come on now. Jonathan Drouin on a bargain bin deal is a replacement for Gabriel Landeskog. Like they had Valerian Nichushkin when Gabe was healthy. They had McKinnon. They had Makar. They brought in Arturi Lehkonen. You can't tell me that there's not somebody that the Avs can go get in free agency or via trade if they didn't have Gabriel Landeskog on their roster. And at some point, it's got to be like, look, we got to go. In order for the Avalanche to maximize who they are as a team, whatever they will be, whether it's, a dynasty in the NHL, whether it's just winning one more cup, part of me feels like they won't realize that potential until they deal with the Gabriel Landeskog thing fully once and for all. Him get back out on the ice or them move on. And I don't think the first thing is happening anytime soon. Every day that he doesn't play, we inch closer to he's never going to play again. 719-24/7-1313. Coming up next, speaking of organizational decisions, the Broncos made one, which I think was very shrewd on their part. I'll talk about coming up next here on Extra Sports 1300. Time Sports on this fine Tuesday. Ryan Kaufman coming your way live from Albuquerque. No, Brett, I am not in a prison cell or a bathroom. I haven't quite figured out. Maybe I'll open this up a little bit. There we go. See, I'm in Albuquerque. I'm in a hotel in Albuquerque. Air Force and New Mexico coming up. It's actually a very nice hotel room that I am in. Not that it matters to anybody, but yes, if you're watching on the stream, which you can do on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you can see that I am not in studio, but that's where I am. Hotel in Albuquerque, Air Force in New Mexico tonight at 7 o'clock right here on Extra Sports 1300. In the meantime, you and me, 719 247 1313. DJ sent me something interesting. I'll give credit to Mile High Sticking, one of the Avs blogs, for putting this together, because the Gabriel Landeskog thing, and we just got done talking about it, it's complicated, and I understand that. I understand it's complicated. I understand no matter what way they go with this, there are implications. But there are some interesting things that are worth bringing up into this conversation. I will coming up in a little bit. In the meantime, I want to talk about the Denver Broncos and a move they did not make. Normally, that is not a subject of conversation. We're always focused on what moves teams made. Here's one that the Broncos did not make that I think was the right call. So Deebo Samuel gets traded to Washington. And I think this was kind of the first litmus test for the Denver Broncos this offseason. Where do they think they are? How smart are they going to be with their money? And I think the first litmus test they passed. Because, and some people could point out slight differences between Marvin Mims and Deebo Samuel. Like, in all the ways that matter, they're very much used the same way. Okay? They are. So it makes no sense to bring in Deebo Samuel. No one in this NFL season for the Denver Broncos made more strides from where they were a year ago than Marvin Mims. And to me, maybe he's never going to be as good as Deebo Samuel. But I think the Broncos are in a position where they would be smarter to see. Just see. Ride the wave. He improved so much. You found a role for him, and a role that he was really good at. Like to see more of him in that role, and bringing in Deebo Samuel, whether they're an exact replica of one another or not, it's going to take away from Marvin Mims. It just is. And I am usually one that says if you can get the better version of that player, then get him. But here's the other part of it. While Marvin Mims may never be as good as Deebo Samuel was, do you know who is also not as good as Deebo Samuel was? Deebo Samuel. So you are getting a guy that would hinder the further development of one of your most exciting offensive assets. And you're bringing him in after a decline in production, injury issues, and you're going to bring him in at $17 million a year, and you're going to put him on the same sideline as your young quarterback who may not be out of the woods yet in terms of maturation, right? Deebo Samuel seems to me like a guy who's going to let Bo Nix hear it if he's not getting the football. And why would you want that in your locker room? So I actually can't see a single reason why the Broncos would be interested in Deebo Samuel, and all reports on the local level say that the Broncos never even made an offer, which I think is right. But maybe their decision is helped out a little bit in this regard. Maybe it was a little bit easier decision to make for two reasons. One, they have a player that's similar in Marvin Mims. But here's the other part. The Broncos are still not completely out from under Russell Wilson yet, right? In that dead cap hit. They're not done yet. So they have to be a little bit more shrewd. I don't think they have to be penny pinching, but they have to be a little bit more shrewd than some teams, like, say, Washington, when it comes to what they spend. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. And I think for the Denver Broncos this offseason, it's not a bad thing. Because as much as I agree with the Denver Broncos passing on Deebo Samuel, I don't like the move for Washington. I don't. Now, the Commanders got closer to winning a Super Bowl this year than the Denver Broncos did. Those are facts. But they are not that different in terms of where they are as an organization. Right? They're not. Jaden Daniels is going into his second season just like Bo Nix is. Jaden Daniels still has development. As much as he was unbelievable, and he was unbelievable this year, he is not a finished product. Teams will now have a full season of tape on him. They will do some other things. If the league figured out Patrick Mahomes, you better believe they can figure out Jaden Daniels. No, and then it's going to be, and the same thing applies to Bo Nix, right? Teams are going to, have a full year of film on him and be able to game plan for him a little bit better than maybe they did last year. And the same can be said for Washington. And the whole thing is, all right, now that teams start to figure you out, can you figure them out and push through and become the quarterback that you hope you'll be? That's with every single quarterback. So Jaden Daniels at times this season is going to struggle. And you're bringing in a diminished Deebo Samuel in with a young quarterback on a team, by the way, and you can at least say this with Deebo, he still might be a pretty good target for the Denver Broncos. Let's take Marvin Mims out of the equation for a second. Deebo Samuel might be the best receiver on the Denver Broncos. So he might get plenty of touches if he were to go to Denver. But in Washington, look at what they have. Deebo's coming in as option like 3. You don't think that's going to bother him? Like, and I don't want to paint Deebo Samuel like a terrible person or a terrible teammate. Okay, but we've seen this. He plays a position that leads to that kind of behavior, diva-like behavior. And he's going from a place in San Francisco that I don't know how it could have gone better. Right? You had this balanced offense that with pretty good quarterback play, like Deebo had it pretty good in San Francisco. And he was, with him and Christian McCaffrey, obviously it was a bit of a power struggle between the two, who is the top option. But Deebo got plenty of touches, and yet there were still reports that he was unhappy. So while I'm not trying to paint Deebo as a terrible teammate, there's also evidence to point to he could be the squeaky wheel sometimes, and that's not the type of player you want to put with a young quarterback. even one that lit the world on fire like Jaden Daniels did. So I think the Broncos made the right call. I think maybe Washington made the wrong call. And I think the reason why they did it is twofold. One, because they feel like because they went to the NFC Championship, they are very close to winning a title. And that is not always the case, right? In fact, I'm a big believer that teams that go to a conference championship and lose actually have a bigger hangover than the team that loses in the Super Bowl. To get that close to the Super Bowl and fall. Like, I think the two teams that you have to look at immediately for next year as prime regression candidates are the Broncos and the Commanders. What they regress to is the question. But I think the Commanders have this feeling of we're just a couple pieces away from winning a Super Bowl. And I don't think they are. I think it speaks to how great Jaden Daniels was last year. He covered up a lot of warts. The Commanders are not a great roster. They have a few players in key positions that are really good, right? But they are not even close. They're on a roster level. They're not close to Philadelphia. They're not close. In fact, the only player on Washington that I would say is better than more talented than his counterpart on Philadelphia is Jaden Daniels over Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts at least has a track record of success and did just win a Super Bowl. But I think Jaden Daniels is a better quarterback, or at least showed he was a better quarterback this past season. So I think the Commanders feel like they're closer than they may really be. And also, when you have the second most cap space of any team in the NFL, you will maybe spend some of that money unwisely. And I think that's what Washington, I think those combination of those two things went into Washington signing him. But the Broncos certainly needing to be a little bit more frugal than Washington. But also, I think understanding how far they are away from winning a title. I think there's some, setting aside Sean Payton's bluster about catching Kansas City, and I've said that him talking about that is as much for motivating his players as it is like a deep held belief that he thinks the Denver Broncos are going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs next year, are going to win the AFC West. I don't think Sean Payton believes it as much as you think he might. I think he does these things for his players as much as he does for the outside. And maybe his own ego a smidge. I think that the Broncos, this is just the first litmus test. Now, how aggressive they get for T. Higgins now that he's been franchise tagged. Can they, because they can still technically get T. Higgins. But this was the first litmus test to see, okay, where do the Broncos believe they are? And if they think that they're close, then getting a player like Deebo Samuel might make a lot of sense. Because Deebo Samuel, where he should go to a team that's ready to win and win big. That's where he should be. Staying in San Francisco, Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City, those are the type of teams that he should want to go to. And I think he's going to be happy initially in Washington playing with Jaden Daniels. But we've seen it. We even saw with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Like, there's a shelf life on these relationships. But this was, again, Broncos, sticking to the Broncos here. This was the first litmus test for the Denver Broncos. All right. Are they going to spend every dollar that they possibly have? And where do they think they are? And I think they passed their first litmus test. They're not on the verge here. And but they can spend their money in other ways at other positions and take care of their own and be in the same place they were a year ago and push forward from there. But I don't think that Deebo Samuel is right for the Denver Broncos. And I think they made the right call in not even really engaging with San Francisco, a team that they've worked well with in the past. Certainly John Lynch would listen, and it would be a amicable conversation. But I'm glad that the Broncos didn't make it, because it shows that perhaps they understand where they are and they're going to spend in a very specific way for very specific players. And I think they need to be choosy. They need to be choosy when it comes to free agency. So I think that the Broncos made the right call. But it will be interesting. Who's more productive this year? Deebo Samuel or Marvin Mims? We did it last year with Bo Nix and Russell Wilson. Let's do it with Marvin Mims and Deebo Samuel. Not that Deebo ever played for Denver. But who do you think is going to be more productive this year? Marvin Mims or Deebo Samuel? I think it could be Marvin Mims. 719-247-1313. Back after this. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. I will tell you one guy, though, that the Denver Broncos should be very interested in. Davante Adams. Davante Adams released today by the Jets. And I think that this would be, and the natural thing is wherever Aaron Rodgers goes is where Davante Adams will go. Well, what if I were to tell you that Aaron Rodgers may not be employed by an NFL team this year? Then where does Davante Adams go? I think, and Davante Adams fits a little bit like, because one guy that I do like for the Denver Broncos is Cooper Kupp, right? Hasn't really displayed the diva-like behavior. Yes, he's slightly diminished from what he was, but he's still making catches. He's still as sure-handed as they come. I think Davante Adams might even be a better option. I'm just looking over Davante Adams' numbers, and I know I have somebody back in the studio that will correct me if I am wrong. I think a lot of any lack of production from Davante Adams has as much to do with who's been throwing him the football as anything. Because the guy was pretty dang good like not that long ago when he was in Vegas. I don't know if he'd want to go to Denver, but and I'm sure Davante Adams is of the same mind where, hey, I want to go try and win a title, right? And Davante Adams now being a free agent as opposed to Deebo Samuel, who was traded, Davante Adams certainly has a say in where he can go. So certainly you would put a lot of the contenders in front of the Denver Broncos as potential landing spots. But just looking at it from the Broncos side of things, I think that'd be a great addition. You may have somebody in Marvin Mims that you can use in the same way you use Deebo Samuel. I don't know that you could quite say that with Davante Adams to bring in somebody like that. I think this is 100% on Davante Adams. What Davante Adams wants out of his football life. And if I were advising Davante Adams, I would say go find the best quarterback you can play with. And if you actually don't like the quarterback, that might be better. Like, get the best one. You don't want to go to the worst quarterback that you don't like. But Davante Adams has been doing this thing where, he wants to play with his buddies. It hasn't really worked out lately for him. So, no to New Orleans. Don't go to New Orleans. And I would say don't go play with Aaron Rodgers. Like, I get it. He's your buddy, but he's not. Aaron Rodgers is not going to go to a good situation if he goes anywhere. Davante Adams, he's running out of time to be an impact player on a Super Bowl caliber team. So I don't know that the Broncos would be very high up on his list and probably shouldn't be. But I mean, I'm looking at one, I guess, Davante Adams told Kay Adams that he'd like to play for Mike Tomlin. Denver's a better landing spot at this point than Pittsburgh. But he could go to Apparently, he wants to be on the West Coast. What if he goes to San Francisco? So look, where he might end up is another conversation. But leaving off with Deebo Samuel, the apprehension that I had about him joining the Denver Broncos, I don't have that with Davante Adams. Now, still can't, spend a ton of money if you're the Denver Broncos. You got to, there's that into the equation as well. But just as a thought exercise, Deebo Samuel on the Broncos, I don't like it. Davante Adams on the Broncos, I very much like. And I think that the Broncos should like that idea. And now figure out how much it's going to cost and whether that works and whether Davante Adams has any interest in potentially going to Denver. But look, the Broncos are going to be. They're not going to have their pick, and they're going to have to think outside the box and look at a bunch of different avenues to try and land Bo Nix some talent around him. But if Davante Adams is game to join the Denver Broncos and the price is right, I would like it. Something tells me that Cooper Kupp is more realistic than Davante Adams, but we'll see. But if the Broncos can land Davante Adams, then I put Davante Adams. I don't know if I put him. Him and Godwin would be pretty close. Cooper Kupp just a tick behind, and then T. Higgins is, I think, how I would look at it. I think Davante Adams is very appealing for the Denver Broncos, but takes two to make a deal, right? And I'll give Davante Adams this level of credit. Like, yeah, we all saw the way things ended in Vegas, and we all watched the wide receiver show and know how Davante Adams was feeling about his situation later in his time. But that guy has been. I'll say this in Davante Adams' defense: he put up with being in Vegas longer than other guys would have. Right? Stephon Diggs was fed up with playing with Josh Allen. Like, if Davante Adams was at least, from everything that I have seen, maybe up until the very end, Davante Adams was a good soldier. He supported his teammates. He went out there, played hard. You didn't see him getting in the face of his quarterbacks and yelling at them. Towards the end, he reached his breaking point. And you can kind of understand playing with the quarterbacks that he was playing with. All around, I think Davante Adams would be a really good idea for the Denver Broncos, but something tells me that Davante is not looking in the direction of Denver now that he has been released. 719-24-7, 1313. Coming up next, more on Gabriel Landeskog and why this situation is even more complicated than you may think. All right, welcome back to Drive Time Sports. Albuquerque, New Mexico is the place I am at. And because I have a basketball game tonight, Air Force in New Mexico, a little bit on that here shortly. In the meantime, DJ, and this is why I absolutely love when DJ produces anything that I am doing, whether it's a game or a show, because he'll send me little tidbits, which is I've come to find out what a radio producer does. I just have so very little practice with having a producer for this show that it's just so foreign to me. But props to DJ for doing that. So he sent me something from Mile High Sticking, one of the popular Avs blogs, and they gave 3 reasons why Gabriel Landeskog couldn't retire even if he wanted to, which is a very weird premise to start with. Wouldn't you say? Like, Gabriel Landeskog can't retire, like he's not allowed to? So, again, it's a blog, so you got, it's going to be a little clickbaity. But the 3 reasons that were lined out. One is because Gabriel Landeskog would be leaving money on the table. Yes, but my premise is at some point he and the Avalanche are square and got to move on with their lives, right? So, but okay, he'd leave money on the table. All right. I feel like that's, do you think that would be a good idea for him to stick around? And, I don't buy that one. Okay. He would leave money on the table. All right, fine. Then there's some insurance stuff, which again, I'm not, whatever. What they can deal with it with the insurance companies. I don't care what the Avalanche have to pay. What we care about is the salary cap. That's what we care about. What they have to pay in insurance and blah blah blah. They in a couple of these they almost make it sound like no player has ever retired in the history of hockey, or asking the question, why would any hockey player ever retire? Right? I mean, you'd be leaving money on the table. Yet players, when their careers have come to an end, they retire. And all this insurance stuff seems to end up working out one way or another. The one that is valid and worth bringing into the conversation is that there reportedly is a rule in the collective bargaining agreement that you still, and they use Roberto Luongo as the example. So Panther fans, Canuck fans, get at me. You may have intimate knowledge of how this all went down. So apparently, when Robbie Luongo retired with years left on his contract, the dead cap hit continued, almost a Russell Wilson type situation, right? Where there was a dead cap that was incurred by his team and they had to carry it till the end of the contract. That to me sounds like one of the best things that has been ever put into a collective bargaining agreement. You get paid no matter what. Or it's the worst thing. Why in the world, if a player retires, would you have to carry his dead cap hit? That is a very weird rule to have in the CBA. If a player retires, that's it. He retires. So I got to dig more into this and see if this is true, because if so, then somebody really messed up at the negotiating table. How is this a rule? That you retire, if you retire in the middle of your contract, like you have to. How many NHL players were forced to play to the end of their contract so the team wouldn't incur a dead cap hit? Thrown out there. Like, I wanted to retire 3 years ago, but my contract runs for another 4, so I'm still here playing. That sounds so bizarre. But if it's true, then I get why him rehabbing and being placed on a LTIR is a better alternative than him retiring. But then don't frame it as we're giving him as much. I mean, then Chris McFarland's words are going to start falling on deaf ears. Because if this is true, that if a hockey player retires in the middle of the contract, that the team has to carry his dead cap hit until his contract is over, then Chris McFarland is not doing this because he owes it to the captain. He's doing this because it's how the Avalanche game the system. So you have a player that functionally cannot play, is probably going to retire. But you keep him active and leave hope that he'll come back so you can utilize LTIR and not have this as a dead cap. I mean, if that's true, then the Avalanche are worse than Vegas. Because that is exploiting it. Are they making Gabriel Landeskog go out there and rehab, act like he's going to come back when they know he's not going to? Just so they can use the LTIR money? Then don't say then it's because we owe it to him and he deserves it and everything. You're doing it to game the system. You're doing it because it would be worse if he actually retired. So he doesn't deserve as much time. You're just willing to give him as much time because it's more advantageous as far as the salary cap for you to keep him around and use LTIR. That's like the polar opposite of the emotion that I think is behind why the Avalanche are doing this. I thought it was loyalty and like loyalty run amok. And no, it's if this is accurate, then this is opposite of that. This is not for the good of Gabriel Landeskog. This is good for the good of Colorado Avalanche. So I gotta look into that. That seems wrong. And either it's wrong because it's factually incorrect, or it's wrong because it shouldn't be there. When a player retires, guess what? That dead cap, that thing shouldn't happen. That should be a wrap. That should be over. But that potentially changes the calculus here. But it's the same point still applies. Right? Because there is the financial ramifications of Gabriel Landeskog, and there are also the emotional, if you will, ramifications. This team has got this cloud hanging over them, and it's like we're always waiting for Gabriel Landeskog to come back, and maybe part of what would benefit the Colorado Avalanche is not having that hanging over them anymore. Well, Gabriel Landeskog's not coming back. Maybe that's the best thing for them. Maybe it's not the player that keeping Gabriel Landeskog on the books is preventing you from getting. Maybe it's just allowing. There has to be some kind of a resolution. There just has to be. It's gone on for too long. I mean, we're going to start having to Google. I did this with football the other day because of that whack Gronk rumor that was totally proven to be incorrect. Said there are only a few guys that had ever left the NFL and came back after 4 years. And two of them were Doug Flutie and Tommy Maddox, who were playing professional football in other leagues. Like, what Gabriel Landeskog is attempting, we've never seen it. And for him to come back and be the player he was, This organization needs resolution. They do. And I think all parties involved do. And nobody wants to do it, but somebody has to. And it has to be this offseason. Avs and Penguins coming up tonight. We'll see how the new guys fare. They have Ryan Lindgren listed with Sam Malinsky on the third D pair. No Jimmy Vesey in the lineup. So kind of goes to my earlier point, not a kind of a meh acquisition, match trade by the Colorado Avalanche. What else you got? And we'll see that before Friday. I will be at the pit just down the street, relatively down the street, a few miles, at the pit for Air Force in New Mexico. A lot on the line tonight for the Falcons, who are trying to be as high of a seed as they possibly can be for the Mount West tournament, which begins on Sunday. So that's coming up. Do want to get in a couple of texts here from the 719. Face it, Kaufman. Landeskog is cooked. Even if he quit hockey, is perfectly healthy with no injury 3 years ago. There's still no way he comes back at that level. He's done. As far as cap hit, there's no C form anymore in the NHL. No biggie. I'm facing it. You and I specifically have had these conversations. We're on the same page. I'm telling you that this is done. It is. Just nobody wants to admit it. And I 100% understand why no one wants to admit it. But no one wants to admit it. And the reality has been staring them in the face since they started this grand experiment. It's unfortunate. Brett ended on a lighter note because I don't it's a bummer what's going on with Gabriel Landeskog. That's not good news. Brett said if we're going to base our opinion on who a better quarterback is after one wins the Super Bowl and one has a great rookie season, then based upon that rationale, Jaden Daniels is better than Patrick Mahomes. I think we all agree on that. See, Brett, why do you always got to bring up the Chiefs? Why you got to always make everything about the Chiefs? Any one text that you send me about the Chiefs is too many. See what I did there? I turned around on you because you get on me for bringing up the Kansas City Chiefs? Yeah. How does that feel? Turning around. That'll do it for me. Appreciate DJ's help. Wouldn't be able to do this literally without him. And I won't be able to do my broadcast tonight for Air Force without him. So double thanks to DJ. Thank you for tuning in. And I'll talk to you at 6:30 if you want to hear the pregame, and 7 o'clock for Air Force New Mexico here on Extra Sports 1300.